Hello, writers, and welcome back to Spooky Writes, your channel all about writing. I'm your host, who is secretly a ghost, Kamal Onor. Now, today we're going to be talking all about characters, how to move them about through your story, how to write through tough parts, of your story when you might feel stuck, when you might not be able to get a character out of a room or get a character to move from one point to another. That's what we're talking about today. So if you get any value from this video, make sure to give it a good thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Help it grow. It means a lot. And with that said, let's head into the storm.
It's the raven's call, the werewolf's howl, the vampire's bite. You search through the woods for safety, but all you find is...
Okay, right. So I recently had a conversation with someone, and she told me that she was having a very difficult time writing a character. She was having a very difficult time of getting a character out of a room. She knew what would happen outside of the room, but she didn't know how to get that character from inside the room to outside of the room. And I think this is one of the things I believe this is one of those things that many writers will overthink about. Especially beginning authors, beginning writers will tend to overthink and scrutinize their own work before they even finish the draft. You have to finish the draft before you start going into critical thinking. So when she asked me, how do I get my character out of the room? I told her quite plainly, whatever the name of your character is, I said, she stood up and left the room. And she went, but it's not that easy. And I said, why can't it be that easy? If you know what's going to happen after she leaves the room, just write the scene as simply as you can possibly write it so that you can get to that part. And then when you tell the full story, you'll have a better idea of the story. You'll be able to have a better idea. And maybe while you're writing, once you get past the point where you're stuck at, while you continue writing, you'll come up with an idea of how this character can get out of this room. And it's so important to not think of our characters as chess pieces. When writers tend to overthink their writing, they tend to feel like their characters are just pieces on a chessboard to be moved, and they can only be moved in a set pattern, in a set way. Your characters can do whatever they want. And also, here's a little secret for you. Your characters aren't real. That's right. If you're writing fiction, your characters are not real. Now, you might say, but they're real to me. I believe they are real living beings because I've imagined them to be so realistic. I've spent so much time with them that they are real people to me. That's all well and fine. It's great to think of your characters like that. But at the end of the day, your characters are creations of your own imagination, and they can do and they should do whatever it is that you want them to do. If you want your character to suddenly she knew she had to leave the room, she stood up and walked outside. That's as simple as you can make that scene to get a character to go from inside of a room to outside of the room. I hadn't read the rest of her story. I didn't know what obstacles were in this character's way. I didn't know what was preventing her from leaving the room, what was keeping her in the room. I didn't know any of that. But again, to me, as an outside critic, when she said, how do I get my character from inside of this room to outside of the room? She suddenly realized that she had to leave the room. She stood up and walked out. So I think and this is one of those things that I think many beginning writers, you should think about as, how can I write this scene as simply as possible? How can I get my character from point A to point B, pulling the thread of my story? Because so many beginning writers, so many aspiring writers have snippets and pieces. They have things that are never finished because they get inspired and they have a scene that they want to start out with. They have a character description and they start writing, and then they're a few thousand words in on their story and they're going, I don't know I can't get this character to do what I want. My characters don't behave the way that I want them to. This again is not this is not real. Your characters are not going to be behaving in a way that you don't want them to. Your characters, again, secret for you guys, are not real. Your characters are figments of your imagination. They will behave, they will do whatever it is that you want them to do. Now, I think, and there's that idea of beginning writers saying, but my characters are real, and yes, your characters should not feel like they're pieces on a, they should not feel like they're just kind of getting, characters go here, I pick them up and I put them down here. That's not how your characters should feel. You really want to get into the flow state of your writing, and the flow state is when your subconscious mind takes over and you're just writing and the hours will fly by. This is when you're going to be doing the best amount of writing. It's going to be when you're just immersed in your own story and you're just writing, you're detailing everything that you're imagining, and your characters are doing exactly what you want them to do. Characters are not going to suddenly go off into the woods unless you write that they went off into the woods. So it's so important to understand that your characters are alive in the sense of your mind. They're not going to have any autonomy of their own. They're not going to act on their own volition unless you're writing a character to do something. They're going to sit in that room forever. They're not going to suddenly get up unless you write that suddenly they got up and left the room. So again, I think so many beginning writers, so many aspiring writers get stuck with the fine details, and first thing you have to do is you have to tell a story. You have to go from point A to point B, and then you can go back and you can color in the fine details. You can go back and you can say, I don't think this is the best way for my character to get out of the room. So then what? So then go back and rewrite that scene, but you have the rest of it, especially if you're saying, I know what happens once she leaves the room. If you want, like, just stop there, write the rest of it, get the rest of your story so that you have the middle towards the end, and you just have this little link here of how do I get my character out of the room? Have someone else come into the room and take her out of the room. I don't understand why it's that difficult, but I've been writing for a very long time, and so to me, my simple answer is if you want your character to do something, write them doing it. Your characters are not going to disobey you. Your characters are not going to suddenly take the story and it's just going to start writing it themselves. Writing is not like that. Your characters will only do what you detail and how you describe them doing whatever they are doing within your story. Your characters should not feel like wooden blocks. Your characters should be fully fleshed out and realized, but they are not. There's that fine line, but there is a fine line between having your characters behaving in a way that's believable within the story that you have created and saying, my characters hijack the story and they're not doing what I want them to do. So I believe that it's a fine line between having your characters feel realistic to you, but not saying, I can't, they're just pick them up, move them here, pick them up, move them here. And again, it's the fine line of saying, my characters are real, your characters should be real, and your characters should feel real to the reader, but they're not going to hijack your story. They're not going to take over the story. They're not going to do anything unless you write them doing it. Leave a comment down below. Have you ever had a hard time getting a character to leave a room or getting a character to listen to you? And with that said, keep it spooky.
And now we must return to the shadows.